This is Friday, April 4th, 9 a.m. Eastern time and some other time in some other places. Thank you for joining the morning meeting. We have so much to get to today. Not kidding. Just a bunch of stuff to show you, to talk about. Sean, Dan, and I will run you through the day and then talk about it and then ask for your questions. If you're here on the two-way platform, please raise your hand. There's a lot to get to. And the tariffs is obviously a huge story. We talked yesterday about, the anger on Wall Street, on Capitol Hill, amongst some CEOs in Europe, but all three of us extremely focused on people we know, people we don't know, who not have just taken 401k hits, but have anxiety and also in some cases losing their job. So we're focused on that as an outgrowth of this, but we're also focused on the reality that the president has a theory of the case. And even though a lot of elites don't agree with him, including on Wall Street, especially on Wall Street, this is the policy he's pursuing, and he has the support of most Republicans in Congress. So, gentlemen, here's what's happening. The president's in Florida. He's got a dinner tonight, a MAGA Inc. candlelight dinner. It's his only event. It's closed press. So as of now, we won't see the president today, but that could change. Same with the vice president, nothing with him. The House is out today. The Senate is beginning now the process of what is called a vote-a-rama, up to 50 hours of debate headed towards a vote expected late tomorrow on the budget. And in order to try to squeeze all this in, they're already in session, which is unusual. Go ahead and take that live. This is the feed of the floor of the Senate, where they are already at work to try to get this done. They may stay even after they finish this vote to do some nominations in order to finish enough work that they can get off on.
I'm sorry, Mark,
holiday.
the feed's dropped.
All right. You're not seeing the Senate floor live, but trust me, they're already meeting. The chairman of the Fed, Mr. Powell, at 11:25 this morning, speaks at an economic conference in Virginia. Lots of eyes on the Fed. Sean pointed out yesterday the courts may adjudicate the tariffs, but the other big player here could end up being the Fed as they try to simultaneously deal with the potential slowdown in the economy and potential inflation coming from the tariffs. On the economy, job figures out today, kind of a mixed numbers, 111, please, on jobs, where the numbers were not quite exactly what expectations were, but not totally out of line with the numbers. And you'll see their payrolls rose, but unemployment ticked up. So kind of neutral there, and obviously not directly reflective of the tariffs because this is data from the last month. All right, in overnight trading, 106. Things down again. Everybody will be watching at 9:30, and we'll take that live at 9:30 to see what the markets do as the U.S. markets open. But overnight, as you can see, everything down, and there continues to be a conversation about whether things are down more than they might be. It's been trending down. On one level, it could be worse. On another level, it's pretty bad. And withering reports from Wall Street, withering people in the finance world on X about this policy, and more people saying this is the greatest act of political suicide, economic suicide the country's ever committed. But the president continues to defend what he is doing. China amongst the countries 110, already announcing retaliatory tariffs. And there's going to be a lot of discussion about that today because obviously of the centrality of China and the complications of the question of off-ramps, which is where we'll start. Guys, we've talked about this from the beginning, even before the announcement. Is the president going to negotiate with countries who want to negotiate, or does he stand firm because the policy can start to unravel if he starts to make exceptions? There's mixed messaging coming from the administration. Here is yesterday, Peter Navarro, White House official who's central to the tariff strategy, saying basically no negotiations, and then a different administration official saying otherwise. Please roll 104.
How negotiable are these tariffs? What does it take for countries to actually negotiate the tariffs that were just announced yesterday?
Let me make this very clear. This is not a negotiation. This is not that. This is a national emergency.
Are you open to deals with these countries if they're calling you?
Well, it depends. If somebody said that we're going to give you something that's so phenomenal, as long as they're giving us something that's good. For instance, with TikTok, isn't it?
So, Sean, is this lack of coordination, good cop, bad cop? Why we have the mixed messages between the president and some of his advisors? Secretary Lutnick said pretty much the same thing as Peter Navarro, no negotiation.
Well, there's two things. One, China's in a separate category in the president's mind because he wants a deal on TikTok. So that and the deadline is Saturday. So that I kind of look as an outlier because that's a separate deal entirely. He wants to be able to take control of it, claim a deal on that. So um, regardless of what you think of that, that's kind of in his mind a separate deal. The problem, and I brought this up yesterday, and this is why, details matter, is that they've put themselves in a box because they've argued that the use of these tariffs was under the guise of the IEPA, the national emergency provisions. So you can't then negotiate. I mean, again, they chose not to go down the route of what in trade world are 301s, 232s, where you have a trade grievance. You lay out kind of like it's the trade legal, here's our list of grievances. Here's why, here's how we want to negotiate them. And here's what you need to do to fix them, right? That's in trade parlance, how you fix a grievance. They chose to use the national emergency provisions. The problem then is it puts you in a box because you have to then say, well, what's the emergency that we're seeking to solve? And therefore you can't have a one-off with Britain and then Tanzania comes in or whatever. It just doesn't, so Navarro and Lutnick and these guys are, I think, trying to sing off the same song sheet now because you will be able to challenge it. The problem is, I think the president wants deals. He wants to be able to say these countries said this, this, and this. Where they've sort of, I think, made some mixed problems on this overall is if this had been straight up reciprocal, which is what the president said, you're at 10, we're going to go to 10. You go down to 0, we go down to 0. Got it. Easy peasy. Everybody gets that math. And I think most people would probably, for the most part, be there. But then they went and they put this floor in and they said, no matter what you do, we're going to stay at 10% because we want to bring in additional revenue to reduce the deficit. Well, if you know that like you're at 20 and the lowest you can get to 10, I mean, they've tied themselves, I think, into a pretzel because you saw Israel come out and say, great, we'll take our tariffs down. And they said, awesome, Israel, but we're going to still tariff you 10%. The UK will tariff you at 10%. And these guys are like, wait, so we do everything right and we still get stuck at 10 because you've got two competing interests. You've got the Navarros of the world who are saying, and the Jameson Greers, the U.S. trade rep, who are saying, let's use these things to get manufacturing, get market access. I'm all in support of that. But then you've got, I think, Lutnick selling him on, hey, by the way, we could be using this to raise some serious money that you could be saying you're paying off the debt. They're tying themselves really tight into what they want because it makes it now harder for a country to come to them to give them a deal because what's that final number that they can get to? If you can't get to 0, if you're the other country, then why would you negotiate?
Dan.
Yeah, they are in so many pretzels on so many levels on so many issues. It's somewhat comical, but also sad. I think this is style versus substance. Stylistically, they want to be tough, strong, and in control. When you're playing poker, you don't want to be blinking in front of your opponent across the table. But then there's the real world, the real lives of real people, and they want deals. And so I think they will, to Sean's point, he wants off ramps to show progress, but not put the U.S. economy on the brink, which is what he's done.
So you talk about go ahead.
We'll get to this later in what I'm looking for this weekend, but I will tell you that I think they need to put points on the board. They need to be able to say this country have lowered their tariff schedule because that's going to be important to show industry, lawmakers, and other partners that this is what we can do. And again, the devil's going to be in the detail on this, but I think that regardless of what I just said, I think they're going to want to do that. The president's going to want to say, I got 5 calls this weekend. Look who was at Mar-a-Lago. And this is what they did to bring down their tariff schedule to give the U.S. farmers and ranchers, et cetera, market access.
You have reason to believe there'll be either CEOs or heads of government in Mar-a-Lago this weekend?
I think CEOs. I don't know. I have not heard anything about heads of government.
Okay. I wouldn't be surprised. Heard it here first. Maybe. So I had anticipated that either inflation or market crashes or heavy declines would be what might make the administration change or ramp up pressure from Congress. But the job losses, saw some announcements in Iowa yesterday, saw some announcement in Michigan. It seems to me the job losses are the opposite of putting points on the board. So Dan, is it possible that more announcements of major layoffs that companies attribute to the tariff uncertainty could be what the pressure point is for there to be some sort of change.
I think it's both. I think job losses they are headline inducing. They dramatically impact communities on so many levels. But I would not discount inflation. As a Democrat who was on the other end of this the last 4 years, I can tell you when prices go up, it really materially impacts a family with major implications. So I think either. Look, the price of eggs spooked everybody, and that was just eggs. If the price of clothing and cars and back to school supplies and your summer vacation just go on and on and on, start going up 15, 20, 30% in the next month. Either one of those two, I think, starts causing the ship to take on water, and people will start to break.
Well, and that's exactly the point, right? So inflation, to me is, I've said this over and over again, it's not a government statistic, it's a gut feeling. And so here's where the administration has some runway on this. If you go down the street, I mentioned this last week, throughout Alexandria right now, a gallon of gas is between $2.80 and $2.95, $3.05 at the corner place that's trying to rip everyone off. But that's a discernible difference, right? So you fill up your car maybe once a week or whatever. So you see that supermarket eggs are down, a lot of those things and those are going to be tariff free because fresh fruits and a lot of those things are either American made or exempt, or in the case of some of the fruits that come in from Mexico, they fall under USMCA. So I say that because for a lot of Americans, for the next week or two, you're going to walk in a supermarket. Okay, not that bad. Clothing, again, and cars, stuff that's on the lot, stuff that's in the store, immediately it's not going to be impacted, right? But it's going to be 60 days when that next shipment to Target from the stuff from Vietnam or Malaysia suddenly gets whacked with the tariff. But it's going to take 60 or 30 or 60 days before you as a consumer, I think, really start seeing it. And the reason I say that is this is where putting points on the board is going to matter for the administration. If they can show it's working, I think they buy themselves some good time.
That's precisely my point. They're not going to see the inflation for 30 or 60 days. The job losses have already started. And if companies keep laying people off, those are big headlines that members of Congress can't ignore.
But don't discount that Target will start to say, because they have to tell their shareholders of any material movement in supply or anything, we are going to be raising our prices 30%. Nike. I mean, I buy your iPhone this weekend because that may be in very short order 40% more. Right. And they have to disclose it.
I spent much of yesterday being called a dumbass because I spoke imprecisely. I don't think the president's putting on the tariffs as a spur to get reconciliation passed. I do believe, though, that in their strategizing, they've said this is a way to pressure Republicans in Congress to move because they have to put points on the board, and reconciliation would be a way to do that. The reporters in my life who I've met who are the most arrogant about their beat, where if you're not a beat reporter, they think you don't know anything, are sports writers and Capitol Hill reporters. I've never covered Capitol Hill full time. I think I know a little bit about it. Here's what the good team at Punchbowl News reports about the connection between tariffs and reconciliation. This is 107. The climate in Washington across the country, both politically and economically, is making it much more difficult for Republicans to pass a massive tax cut plan. Equity markets are getting rocked. Economists are already saying the recession is possible. It'd be difficult for Republicans to make the case that they should cut government spending. One almost wonders if the president should have waited on his tariff regime until after the reconciliation bill was passed. In other words, their analysis is the exact opposite of mine, that the tariffs are hurting the prospect of reconciliation. I say it's helping. Guys, I know I asked you about this yesterday. Do you agree more with me or Punchbowl News, Dan?
The people at Punchbowl News are extremely good friends, so I love them and I love you. I don't know. And I almost rarely go down the middle on this. I see both sides. I think it's a question of if it's a little bit bad the next 30 days, then I agree with you, Mark. I think if this starts to accelerate, because as Sean, you say, they don't put points on the board and everything starts to feel like it's snowballing downhill, boy, you're asking everyone to stay together through the spring. That could get very, very bumpy.
Sean, I don't even think this is, with all due respect, I don't think this is a no-brainer. They have to pass this. Like, this is in their DNA. This is what they can't. I mean, this is regardless, but this, yeah, I think this added some accelerant to it. But there isn't, like, Are you kidding me? The idea that they wouldn't do this now? I mean, I talked to probably 6 or 7 lawmakers last night. They need this. Like, this is even more so. They want this done.
So
I wonder who the hell they're talking to.
yeah, Dan, tell your friends at Punchbowl News that even though they're experts at covering the Hill, just this once they might be wrong.
They might.
Okay.
They might.
Okay. So 2 prominent Democrats raised their heads yesterday and weighed in on the Trump administration. First, Barack Obama. Please put up 109. Unfortunately, this is not on camera, but President Obama spoke at an event yesterday.
Hamilton College.
Hamilton College. And here's what he said. He said, talked about the administration is threatening law firms. Oops, disappeared. Wait for that to come back. Tore into the Trump administration on a number of fronts. I think, quote, I think people tend to think democracy, rule of law, and independent judiciary, freedom of the press, that's all abstract stuff because it's not affecting the price of eggs. Well, you know what? It's about to affect the price of eggs. I'm not really sure what that means. Anyway, he's back. Now, we're about to show you some video of Kamala Harris at an event yesterday. Some of you are going to be triggered by this, and that can be true whether you're Democrats or Republicans. What's on display here, I would say, is something that's going to make some people shake their heads. Some will love it. But I'm just warning you that if you're triggered by word salad or other aspects of the vice president that may not be her greatest strength, please mute your device. 108, please.
We are seeing organizations stay quiet. We are seeing those who are capitulating to clearly unconstitutional threats. And these are the things that we are witnessing each day in these last few months in our country. And it understandably creates a great sense of fear. Because, you know, there were many things that we knew would happen. Many things, I'm not here, so I told you so.
Sean, if you were chair of the DNC and the vice president called you and said, former vice president called you and said, should she be out there? She'll do whatever you say, what you think's in the good of the party. Would you want her out there or not?
I'd quote her to herself, "Don't come. Don't come." That I'm one of those people that was so happy to see that clip. It was just a great reminder of all of the reasons that she lost the election.
Dan, if she asked you for advice and said, you know, what's the most constructive role I can play? Is being out in public and talking about her critique of the Trump administration good for the party or not?
Yes, it is. If I were advising her, I'd say get a pair of balls and do it more. Because to me, it's a proof positive that the water's getting warm, that we have momentum, that 2 of the most cautious people in the party are stepping forward and putting their chests out a little bit. Yeah, look, she's not the perfect messenger, just the way Hillary Clinton's not a perfect messenger. But did Donald Trump have any, self-awareness or hesitancy to speak up in 2021, 2022 on, issue after issue in which Joe Biden was cleaning up his messes, in which he had, a paper trail that was the complete opposite side? Of course not. But he has no shame, no remorse, and he punches with great, emphasis. So if I were her and I was advising her, and I'll take her at her word, you want to be a public figure, you want to be in the fight, don't speak cautiously, don't speak kind of hesitantly, throw punches directly with some authority, and don't stop doing it. We need everybody on the field.
And I just say, luckily, based on most of the people in your party, she could probably do exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
All right. We'll talk more about that, I'm sure. Laura Loomer met with the president and the national security advisor in the Oval Office, demanded that a bunch of people be fired who work in the national security apparatus, including some senior people. And those people, many of those people, not all of them, were fired. Did she cause the firing? The president suggested not necessarily, but most people think she did. She's been on this platform. She's a very controversial figure. I predict that we'll find out that the circumstances under which she got that meeting have upset some people, and we'll see when she next gets into the Oval Office. But here's what she put on social media, 105, after the announcement was made that people she wanted fired were fired. Look at the people who are crying about my meeting with President Trump and firing of NSC and NSA officials today. The people crying are the ones who worked to undermine Donald Trump, members of the Democratic Party, and the mainstream media. They are furious. That's how you know these people needed to be fired. You need to protect Donald Trump. Vetting matters. Sean, was Laura Loomer a factor in when you served in the White House?
No.
No. So what do you make of her influence during the campaign when she appeared headed for a lot of influence? Other people around the president protested. How did this happen, and what's the meaning of it to you?
So I can honestly say I have no knowledge of what happened yesterday, so I'm going to give you my analysis without feeling like but I think that she was used as meaning you can't just walk into the White House and you can't obviously walk into the Oval Office. So somebody approved both of those actions, right? That being said, so she is being used. There's somebody who wants to undermine Mike Waltz. And I think that this was great. You get to be the vessel. I'll use you to come in, plead your case. Just as a side note, according to the reporting, Waltz was in the Oval for a separate meeting, as was Howard Lutnick, and which is very Trumpian, which is 5 meetings collide at once, and the next thing you know, everybody's in there having a discussion and walking in and out.
The next thing you know, the agriculture secretary is picking Houthi bombing targets.
Yeah, well, I've seen some very interesting things over my time, and but so just so it wasn't like Waltz was just random. I mean, he happened to be in there when she was escorted in, and so the point is, she was used as like a heat-seeking missile to disrupt what's going on at the NSC, to undermine Waltz, and that's, to me, just plain and simple. This was the old school equivalent of leaving an article on the desk in the library in his office just to make sure he saw it because you were trying to create an action.
Dan, I often point out media double standards that work in favor of against the Republicans. If a Democrat equivalent of Laura Loomer went into the Biden or Obama Oval Office and demanded the firing of national security officials, it would be just a massive controversy. This is getting some coverage, as far as I'm concerned, not necessarily enough. What do you make of what happened and the meaning of it?
It's just crazy does crazy. I mean, it's unbelievable. We're not talking about the agriculture department or the Department of Education, like senior staff. National security people, cyber security, which is one of the most at-risk parts of the infrastructure of the United States, and a right-wing provocateur just walked in. To my knowledge, Laura Loomer is neither a national security nor a cybersecurity expert. She is a grievance machine in the MAGA universe, entertainment, and she fired people. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, again, I would just say, just remember what the case was. It wasn't like Bob or Susie are bad at their job. It's that they are never Trumpers undermining the president's agenda. And I sort of, and I'm not taking away from it, I just sort of find to me, it was funny because one of the comments that when I was talking with somebody yesterday, I said, how the hell does she know who these people are? Right. I mean, this is why I go back to my analysis. She was sent in there as a heat-seeking missile to take people out intentionally.
Right. Well, then if that is true, that is what they are, please put the proof forward. Yeah, I'd love to see it.
Let me say something that's obvious, but I think needs to be said. These people were vetted and hired and thought to be the best possible people to take these important jobs. So she came in and she said they weren't vetted right, but they were vetted. And so it speaks, if the president's judgment is, you know what, these are the wrong people. That's 7, as far as I know, maybe 9 wrong people in senior jobs who turned out not to be the right people. That's not great.
But Mark, so this is interesting because yesterday, not one of those folks, but somebody else that I know who allegedly was denied something. I sort of asked, I said, look, let me just, I can't remember, what could they have possibly done? And it was like, well, they didn't, but so-and-so that they're affiliated with. And I was like, so now it's, again, it's sort of an interesting, to your point about vetting. There's some of it's that legit, what have you done? What is your qualifications for this job? And then there's the rumor part of it, which is, I know that Halperin was in the room 2 years ago. He'd said this to so-and-so, and that doesn't come up on a vet, but that's sort of the anecdotal piece of the political part, which is, where are your alliances? And that's where I sort of am intrigued, because in this administration right now, you've got some people, you think about some of the highest members of this cabinet who, within the last 5 years, have said some pretty horrible things about President Trump.
Yeah, vice president.
Well, not
Elon
five.
Musk.
Yeah.
But
we
and
keep
others
going.
who are alleged to have been in a room and didn't object when some, and I'm going, to me.
But John, I'd say Sergio Gore, the head of personnel, we know from lots of reporting that they have vetted people for loyalty, right?
Correct. But what I'm telling you is that's the difference is I looked through and I don't see anything on Mark Halperin's social media and and there's nothing that you said. But then I find out, I come to you and I say, oh, Dan Turrentine says there was one time in a meeting. And so if I believe him,
Understood,
that's not going to come up in a vetting report.
Understood. Well, no, because they did try to vet people for that. So what I'm saying is if Laura Loomer is right, that these people, based on the facts she presented, don't clear the bar of loyalty as defined by this administration, shame on the vetters for not finding it, because they did try to find it. Why is Laura Loomer better than the White House Personnel Office at unferreting these disqualifying circumstances?
Well, I actually, that's what I'm arguing, I guess, is that it's not like, hey, here's the tweet that they sent out where they said you're a horrible person.
Yeah.
It's all anecdotal, which is, I heard 5 times this person. That's
Right.
never going to come up in a vet.
Well, of course it could, because Laura Loomer could find it. Why is she better at finding things than they are?
Well, no, that's presupposing that what she's coming up with is actual evidence versus.
It was enough to get them fired.
I agree with you.
Or I remember a time when the administration talked about the best and the brightest. Now they have their own DEI programs. This is unbelievable.
All right. The vice president yesterday said they're not going to need a TikTok extension. There's going to be a deal. There's all sorts of reporting about what the deal is. Do either of you know what the TikTok deal that's about to come together is?
So the funny part is, here's what I think. There's obviously a bunch of suitors. I have a feeling something's going to do with Oracle. The problem to me isn't that part. I've never heard China say that they're willing to give it up,
right?
Or not just share wise, but on the back end, which is what we really care about. I mean, I don't really give a crap who owns it. I care about the fact that they're sucking up all of our information and then sending our kids horrible messages. So it's to them. I mean, I hope they've got to this. I haven't heard one thing that says that China will allow ByteDance to cut itself off from TikTok.
Right.
That to me is the only thing that matters.
Yep, I agree with that. Dan?
I can't believe we're going to trade away some economic security of working class people for TikTok. That's unbelievable.
Here's what we're going to do. We're going to try to finish our last 2 topics really quick before 9:30, so we can take the market open at 9:30 and then go to folks' questions. So if you want in the conversation here on the platform, please raise your hand. So there's a poll out today showing AOC beating Schumer in a primary. It's not necessarily the greatest poll in the world, but here's what I was thinking about, Dan. If she ran against him, I know exactly what she would say to try to beat him. It's very hard for me to imagine how Schumer could come back, because the way to try to beat her would be to go negative on her. She's inexperienced. She's too left wing. Seems to me that all that would backfire. And so I think if she runs against him, he has to quit the race, because I don't think he can defend himself against her. What do you think of that analysis?
I tend to agree. The only road I see is what Mitch McConnell did in 2008, when he ran heavily on what he had delivered for Kentucky.
Bingo.
And I think if I were Chuck Schumer, I'd be like, you see the brand new LaGuardia, the brand new JFK about to be built, the bridges, the tunnels, they go all around the state. That is thanks to, Kirsten Gillibrand and me.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say, I was thinking about this, that is what Alphonse D'Amato tried to do against Chuck Schumer. And Chuck Schumer simply said, it is time for a change, and it's a new generation, and he's too, in bed with Newt Gingrich. All due respect to Mr. Gingrich, if he's on here, stop. I agree with you, Mark.
I'd love to know what Chuck's own polls say, because I'm sure he's paid for polls. Sean, thoughts?
I'm sure if he had one, it'll be out.
I'm on the team here. Like, I think it would be a tough road to hoe. Yeah. But if you were Schumer, the only real card to play is I've delivered for you, and call and just work the hell out of the mechanics, going through borough by borough, precinct by precinct, saying, I got your kid a job. I mean, this town, not just this town, but there is the Schumer Alumni Association. Yep. Say what you will about Chuck Schumer, but he has a really strong record of producing some high caliber, staffers that have gone on to do a lot in life.
He does. Hard to run negative ads against her, I think, on any topic, even by a super PAC. Paul, go ahead and put up the markets.
By the way, Mark, she would also raise an
Yes,
insane
insane
amount of money.
money.
And Sean, to
Insane.
your point, you know what she'd say? Look at all his people on K Street.
Yeah. Okay. While we watch the market open, Sean, and Dan do winners and losers and what to watch for. Sean, winner of the week.
Virginia. We were just named the state least or most likely to survive an alien attack. So I want to thank Governor Youngkin, Lieutenant Governor Winsome Sears, and Attorney General Miyares for having Virginia prepared to survive an alien attack.
Dan.
I had to stretch for that.
Okay.
I'm going to say Hakeem Jeffries because the Democrats had another great week, and the odds of taking the majority back, or the perception that we may take the majority back, is gaining steam.
White House aide Stephen Miller. 10 years ago, he was an anonymous aide to a relatively unknown senator. He's now on policy and rhetoric and politics. He is one of the most influential White House advisors I've ever seen. Has pretty good road in 10 years. And of course, the tariffs were he was a big part of the tariff rollout plan. Sean, loser of the week. First
of all, it's funny that I really searched for I'm kind of intrigued that we all went, there's not one consensus. It's the first time that I was thinking about this as the show. My loser of the week is actually a riff off of what you said about the reporters. I think all of these globalist elitists who didn't think Trump would follow through are the big losers, because over and over I heard he's not going to really do this. It's not going to be big. And once again, they just don't understand who this guy is. Dan.
Wall Street. They don't, the uncertainty is their Achilles. They hate it. It's going to be bumpy.
The international globalist order is the loser of the week. Sean, what to watch for this weekend?
Truth Socials. I think that if this president does not a ton of media interactions on the weekend, but he does fire off a bunch of truths. I would keep an eye on, when he's on the golf course, and as soon as he gets off, how many truths he sends off about what's going on in Tariff, who's he meeting with, what he's accomplished. But Saturday afternoon to late evening was my sweet spot of watching Truth Social. Dan.
I was about to say the Trump's headspace. And by the way, the irony or the perception of him golfing while this stuff's happening is not good.
Watch me while I hit this shot, as George W. Bush
exactly
said.
What I was thinking. Yep.
What to watch for is what heads of state show up at Mar-a-Lago. All right. Let's bring folks in as we watch the Open. Again, as always, tell us who you are, or where you are rather, and what's on your mind. And we'll start with Lisa. Lisa, unmute. Tell us where you are, what's on your mind. Thank you for joining.
Hi. I had a national security anecdote. When I graduated college in 1998, my first job was at a Department of Energy site. This is where back in the 50s, we made the uranium and plutonium that went into our nuclear weapons arsenal. So when I first got there, I was uncleared, and the area that I worked in required a security clearance. So all of the employees were given a badge, and I had to be escorted to my office. I had to be escorted to the bathroom, and everywhere I went, I was called a red badge. But my badge, the background of it was green, and everybody's badge, the background was green. So I asked one time, why am I called a red badge? And the way the badges used to be, depending on the security clearance you had, it was either blue, yellow, or red. So in the 90s, Hazel O'Leary had come to the site. She had come to our site or another site and noticed a racial disparity between the skin color of the wearers of the different color badges. And so she ordered them to all be green. So it was just an example of DEI
I'm going to stay with Todd tonight, so we're just
national security. So I didn't know if y'all had heard a similar story. Oh, and when Bush was elected, Spencer Abraham, he brought back the multicolored security badges, because if you see a person with a red badge walking 100 yards away unescorted in a secured area, it's much easier to detect, hey, he's somewhere he's not supposed to be, versus everyone wearing the same colored badge.
All right, Lisa, thank you for sharing that. Dan.
I obviously am not familiar with the specifics of what you just said, but clearly there were programs both in the public sector and private sector that supported DEI, and country is addressing that now. And you would hope that the people are hired for their qualifications, not necessarily for other reasons.
Sean.
Yeah, I've never heard that before. I've spent a lot of time mostly, around DoD type stuff, and badges are,
okay. It's beautiful.
you swipe, so it's a little different of a world. But I've never seen the colored part, so I'm not familiar with that.
All right, Lisa, thank you for coming in. Grateful to you. Let's bring in Eric. Eric, unmute. Tell folks where you are. What's on your mind?
Thank you very much. I am beautiful upstate New York, longtime listener, first time caller. Love what you guys are doing. I want to ask specifically about the reconciliation bill, and if you think it's actually possible that they could pull off no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, plus increasing the rates or not extending the tax cut on the highest income levels, because that to me is such an interesting combination that I would think the GOP is effectively completing their transition to a true populist party. It could set them up well for 2026, and then also sort of transitions the Democrats to fully being the party of the moneyed elite, which I never thought I would see in my lifetime.
Great question. And obviously it'll depend on how big the bag is of how much they can fit in there. But Sean, your thoughts on no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, and not allowing the top rate to stay, to the lowering of the top rate of individuals to go back up?
Yeah, I mean, look, we've talked about this before. This is all going to be sort of a little bit of a, I guess that, I've said this phrase a couple times today, but the devil's going to be in the detail. There's going to be a lot of trying to figure out how we can claim something. So when you do a tax credit, a lot of times there's always thresholds, when you qualify for it. So, you do the child tax credit and they say, well, you have to make less than 80,000 as an individual, 100,000 as a couple. And those are I'm not being precise on that. But the point is that, so you could say no tax on tips up to $5,000 in the following, way. I mean, so they're going to make it happen. And I think similarly on Social Security, you'll find a way where they make it so that they can say they did it. But if you think about no tax, I mean, Social Security is a little bit easier, but that's a lot of revenue to take off the table. I think that one will be a little bit easier, a little bit higher of a threshold. But again, you'll means test it. So you'll say, if you make more than X, you can't, deduct this. But they're going to want it as a talking point more than anything, especially heading into the midterm, saying we help, working class people who are bartenders and waitresses, et cetera. No tax on tips. And then they're going to want to do the same for seniors. But to me, these are the kind of, they're kind of gimmicky because I think that they will time out real quick.
Yeah, it'd be brilliant politics for Donald Trump and Republicans, because the biggest talking point Democrats have right now is you are going to cut taxes primarily for the rich and for companies. And here's a trade war that is going to, at least in the immediate run, affect most low income and working class people. And you're going to take the whatever revenue you raise to try to give more tax cuts to the wealthy. So it's the best argument Democrats have right now. I'm not talking about the merits of it, just the raw politics. That would undercut things dramatically and allow them to say, we are willing to kind of, have the rich pay a little more to help you, the working class.
Eric, I think no tax on tips is going to be in because it was the first one of these the president talked about. It's got a lot of political resonance. So I think that'll be in. No tax on Social Security benefits it's going to have to have an income cap on it, because the math doesn't work otherwise, and it will be low enough probably that it will mostly apply to people who don't pay taxes currently. So it'd be sort of meaningless. And in terms of the top rate, they considered it in the first term. They didn't do it in part because the establishment wing of the party likes to cut taxes for billionaires. They'd be brilliant to do it. I don't know if they will, but also obviously helps them on the revenue side. So it'll be interesting to see who pushes back. If they don't do anything with carried interest, if they don't do anything with cap gains, then the rich people in this country are like, all right, as long as we're whole there, it's okay. We can let our rate go back up a little bit. So I'm not predicting it will happen, but again, it'd be, as was said, be brilliant politics to do it. Eric, thank you for coming in. Appreciate the question.
I buy real estate in Florida if that goes through.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people in the New York area that may start leaving.
Yes. Charles, welcome and unmute. Tell folks where you are. What's on your mind, please.
Oh, you're muted, Charles.
No, he's unmuted, but we can't hear him. Charles, try one more time, see if you get your mic to work. If not, we'll bring someone else in while you fix it.
No, we can't.
Can you hear me now? No,
Yes, sir.
absolutely. All right, here we go. I grew up in Michigan, and I have a different take on the tariff policy than most people. I think the administration has a messaging problem and not necessarily an idea problem. We've been talking for several years about income inequality in this country, and if you look at what free trade and NAFTA and bringing China into the World Trade Organization did with income inequality and deindustrialization of the Midwest to this country, we've been trying to combat that in a post-industrial economy by raising minimum wage. This is another tactic to do that. And so I just wondered, and I also think about COVID and the fact that how the disruption, if there was ever a conflict between the US and China, or any conflict kicked off with Israel and Iran in this world, it could really upset things with the way that the current industrial chain, the chain of industrialization goes right now. So I think there's a lot of wisdom, especially right now, to do this in advance of those things. So but I don't hear people talking in that way. I mean, a little bit with we're going to reindustrialize the Midwest, but ultimately bringing these jobs back is essentially like raising minimum wage for a large majority of unskilled workers. So
Charles, thank you for that. Just say a little bit more. If the president said, Charles, how should we talk about it? Just talk a little bit more about how they should talk about it from your point of view.
Well, I think that to talk about it in the sense of COVID and how disrupting the supply chain, what could happen if we actually do have a conflict with China, considering we rely so heavily on goods from Asia, and what that could do to the average American. And then as well about, basically bringing back and doing something about income inequality, bringing the jobs back. They're starting to talk about it now. But at first it was about fentanyl, then it was about this, and then it was about that. So there's a lot of mixed messaging about why they're actually engaging these trades. And I think that Lucknick and some of the other people have finally got them on message about reindustrialization. But I think the supply chain issue and the danger of relying so heavily on other countries when we're possibly headed to a very rocky time with conflict, it makes a lot of sense to do it now, because you can't, if China hit Taiwan and we ended up in a war, that's something you can't fix within a week, or a month. It would take years to get that. So do it now, because we are in danger of possibly, being forced in a situation where the global order is going to blow up anyway.
Sean.
So I just sent this. I don't think I gave it a quick enough time to the team, but I'm going to try to show you this chart real quick. I mentioned this yesterday. Look at the red line. I don't know how it doesn't matter. Shoot, hold on. If you see the red line, that's China. Okay, that's their manufacturing. We're down below that. If you look at the line on the other side, we're way up. In the last 20 years, our manufacturing base has gone bye-bye. Theirs has gone sky high, right? I mean, they are now at 33% of global share of manufacturing, and we are down to 15. And it was basically reversed 20 years ago. So, Charles, to your point, we're screwed. I don't think people appreciate the fact that, like, munitions-wise, manufacturing base-wise, we are screwed right now. And everyone wants to talk about, all these options. The bottom line is, if you actually appreciate that China is literally said publicly that they intend to attack or take over Taiwan by 2027, not rhetoric. The former CNO had a clock in her office that counted down to 2027 for a reason. And we are sitting around twiddling our thumbs, talking about whether or not, TikTok's a threat, a spy balloon's a problem, whether or not we should do stuff to bring our manufacturing base back home. This is a direct and existential threat to our very freedom. And most people on both sides of the aisle are sitting around having these stupid conversations. I think you're absolutely right, Charles. If we don't make bringing back manufacturing to the United States the highest priority, we are going to regret this for the rest of our lives and our children's lives and their children's lives.
Dan.
Look, aspirationally, I agree with Sean. I think everyone in America does. The challenge is you are trying to unwind 80 years of integration. And I have said this both on, X and Substack and on this show. 35% of this country, primarily in manufacturing, has been catastrophically crushed by free trade. But everyone has got to also acknowledge that we have benefited mightily from free trade, mightily, not just the stock market, not just CEOs, but the cost of goods in this country. The fact that people go to Walmart and can buy a sweatshirt for $15 or $10, electronics, just go on and on and on, things that we acquire. It is the history of the world. Europe lost its industrial lead to the United States 250 years ago. Then it started leaving here. We should try to solve this problem, but it is not so simple as we're just going to bring it back. So we have to have this debate as a country about all the trade-offs.
Sean, what do you think of the argument that's gotten a lot of currency in the last day, that by setting up these barriers, we could see the Europeans turn to China as a trading partner, and that this is going to benefit China, at least in the short term?
Actually, it's a great that's a great question. Dan was actually out with my guest last night. We talk about this tonight on my show. That's exactly, but it goes both ways. And this is the argument that I make. Is I actually think that Europe does end up doing that, because look at the difficulty in getting them to understand the concerns about Huawei. Huawei went around and basically told Europe, hey, we can do all this a heck of a lot cheaper. And Europe said, oh, cool, cheap. And no one cared about the long-term consequences of what they were getting in bed with. So I think that this is actually a real threat, because I think there's a lot of people, especially on my side, who think that Europe will resist China. But cheap goods are really attractive. I mean,
so if there's a EU China trade zone that the U.S. is not a part of because of the tariffs, isn't that potentially just a huge disaster from a competitive point of view and from a consumer point of view?
Absolutely, that would be, and I think part of our job.
How could the White House head that off?
Well, that's the key, is that there has to be a deal ultimately that recognizes the potential of something like that. So they've got to make a deal and understand and hope that Europe sees the light, the EU as a whole, that would not be a great long-term bet. The same way that they bought into buying gas out of Russia that didn't turn out too well. So I think part of this is, I mean, there's a part of it that's financial and a part of it that it's actually like kind of moral, which is that really how you guys want to, who you want to end up drawing an alliance with? But I do think that is a huge threat that we have to worry about, is, do we push Europe into the arms of China?
On what? On Greenland, on NATO, on Ukraine? Like, pick your topic in which we are giving the rest of the world the middle finger, all in the name of America first. We win always, right? You guys are weak. We win.
That would be great.
That is why all of this taken together raises serious questions for our long-term national security.
If we're relying on the Germans and the French to do the moral thing as opposed to what's in their economic interest, I think that's a problem.
But Dan, look, I appreciate the phrase, but I keep hearing this over and over again. How can we treat our friends like this? I'm sorry, I keep coming back to this. What kind of friend screws you the way that we've gotten screwed by all these trading partners?
But
I don't understand.
Sean. One, the manufacturing base got screwed. That is significant. But the other 60 to 70% of this country has not been screwed. They have. Sean, how many German and French products do you see on the streets in the United States?
No. I'm not. Again, I don't disagree that it's been like a huge, but there is. My point is, at some point, there is a degree of fairness. It's not being a bad friend to say, "Hey, India, you charge us on average 59%. Maybe that's not the nicest way to treat us." for all these people who we have their back in Europe, who they haven't even contributed their fair share to NATO, to then take advantage of on trade isn't a good friend.
But Sean, it is not a just two country thing. Like, this is Mark's point. Fine, you guys want to give us the middle finger to us, we're just going to go deal with somebody else. Like, this is the challenge. It's not that black and white.
I agreed, and it's not that black and white.
It's
just China as a purely transactional cost either. They're getting something for that.
Yeah, but this is one of the scariest risks to me, because the Chinese are ruthless, and they can afford, even in their weakened economy, they can afford to make some deals with the Europeans now that are loss leaders in order to lock them in as trading partners in a way that they'll be inclined to do. I think it's really, really dangerous. All right, Charles, thank you very much. Mike, welcome, and tell folks who don't know where you are, after you unmute, what's on your mind.
Like, it just doesn't serve anybody, right? It just doesn't serve.
Mike?
No, you just muted yourself.
How about now?
There you go. Perfect.
From Tuesday, I have a mentoring question. You guys had really high-level jobs and have come back and rebounded from those. Did you guys have mentors to help you reestablish yourself, if that's the right question?
Yeah, we talked earlier in the week with Dave McCormick and Dina McCormick about their book about mentoring. So, Sean and Dan, tell your best mentoring stories. Thank you, Mike.
Sure.
Actually,
I'm sure. Go ahead,
no, go ahead, Dan. I want to go. You go first.
Sure. This career here in media is new to me. I'm 7 or 8 months into it, and my mentors are the two guys that are on the screen with me right now. I've learned a ton. I send them texts. I ask them questions, both how to operate on air and off. And I couldn't be more grateful to them.
Well, thank you for that.
Very nice.
Sean. It's a great question. I was actually, Dave and Dina had an event last night, and I was talking to her about it.
It's like
that there's two aspects that Dave McCormick said last night that are important. I think finding a mentor and being a mentor. Well, he said 3 things, and those were 2. And then the third, which really I took away, was that what Dan just said, which is appreciating the people who do it. And, when I left the White House, I had several conversations. In fact, I had I think it was a Saturday morning, Mark, there was rumors about what I was going to do and write a book. And Mark was like, look, make this a priority, make this a priority. So I've talked to, I've had a lot of folks on everything from business to media stuff. So, yeah, I think that's something that, and that's why, to some degree, there's an element of appreciating, but I wouldn't even say one, because I was a staffer my whole life up until my time at the White House. And then I got out, had a lot of business opportunities, had a lot of media opportunities. And as each one opened up a new chapter in that, even just doing books, I mean, I had a bunch of folks. Newt Gingrich called me at one point, was like, he's written like 30 books, and he was like, this is what you need to do, and this is what you need to prioritize, and this is how you need to do it. And it's like, holy smokes. Each new element of life has given me something where I've walked in. And then in some cases, Dan Bongino, when I got into podcasting, was like, let me explain to you, here are the priorities you need to worry about. Boom, 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 boom. Don't do this. Don't do this. I didn't settle for that. And so I've had a lot of great folks. It hasn't, when I was growing up on the Hill, Ed Gillespie, who been a long time political operative, was always a great mentor to me, always had time, great advice. And then as I left the White House, and there was like all these new things that I'd never thought I'd ever do, write books, do TV. I did a movie reality show. And along the way, each element had somebody who said, if before you sign that deal, here's what you need to think about. Here's what you need to worry about. Here's how you maintain, here's your avenue of success. So I think it's critical to have those kind of people in your life. The one last thing I'll say, and I wrote this in my first book, when you have a mentor, or especially in the job field, and I've said this before, Dan and I did this jobs thing a few months back before this. Mentors are there to like help guide you along. But I think there's a big difference between that and being a guidance counselor. Like, people will call me all the time and say, I just don't know what I want to do. And I'm like, okay, I don't have 4 hours to hear your life story and figure out your strengths and your weaknesses. I can help
just gonna do a month,
kind of tweak the ship. Here are the 5 phone calls I can
Right,
make.
no, I hate to
But I
have
think
things-
part
I
of
like
this
the actual
is
paper, but then I
understanding the
never-
role of a mentor. Like, I don't call these people and say, I'm thinking about, maybe going to play professional soccer. What do you think about that? I mean, it's know who you're calling and know what you're asking for.
Mike, thanks. Great question. Appreciate you coming in. President Trump on Truth Social, right before the markets opened, wrote this: to the many investors coming to the United States and investing massive amounts of money, my policies will never change. This is a great time to get rich, richer than ever before! Exclamation point. Sean, why would he have put that on Truth Social?
To get ahead of the market opening. I don't know, maybe that you buy, because I think that's, I think he's trying to get people to get to counter this, to go be active in the market, to help counter, all the kind of stuff. And also he wants to basically have them call him and say, hey, we'll invest 50 billion in the United States. We'll do 100 billion. We're going to build a new factory. But this is him basically sending the bat signal up.
Right now, we're on track for a very bad week. Worst 2-day, if it stays the way it is, worst 2-day period since COVID. Dan, what do you think that if there is a rally as the day goes forward, what would cause it? That Trump post, obviously, but what else?
I think if there is a sense that they're looking for off ramps and maybe somebody is going to be the first one to step up, to some country or somebody say, as you say, their president's flying to Mar-a-Lago or something, any sign that this may start to wind down.
Sean, if there's a deal, like of the kind Dan said, if there's a big announcement, it's a deal. What do you think the activity is? In other words, let me ask it this way: the people like on Wall Street who are on X every minute in my feed saying this is the worst thing ever, this is self-inflicted, it's a disaster. Are those people are those people just gone? Like, are they open to new data? Or those people are just against this no matter what positive signs the president has?
My guess is 80 to 85% of them are like, this is stupid. It'll never be a smart move. And then there's probably 5 that say, hey, not bad. But I also think you're going to get 5 or 10 people maybe this weekend that announce something, or a country, whatever. And then you've got 165 to go, right? So if you're one of those 80 to 85% in your feed that's saying this is dumb, you're going to say, yeah, you got a handful of people, but you got 165 other countries of that 170 that we still have a problem with.
But they look for trend lines. I mean, I think Wall Street people care about making money. Like they look for new data anywhere they can get it to figure out where the puck is going always and get there before anyone else. That's how they make money. So I think they're not like anti-Trumpers per se. Yes, in their personal lives they may be, but like you wouldn't have a lot of clients and money to invest if you traded just because of your political affiliation. So,
but Dan, actually, what you're saying, I'm so intrigued by, right? Because I'm actually at some, like, I got a D in economics, but I'm smart enough to know you buy low, sell high. And so right now the answer is, okay, what are the good companies that are going to be least affected by tariffs? Which ones are the things that manufacture more in the United States? And that's where I'm sort of intrigued that I'm not hearing a lot from as a non-expert, because if I'm agnostic, right, I go, okay, what's good today? Here's the things that I should invest in, instead of I'm pissed off because if I'm, again, maybe I just don't know the industry well enough, but if I were somebody today, I'd say, okay, I'm calling my clients and telling them, hey, by the way, Turrentine Industries produces everything in the United States. They got 50 years history. Boom, get into them early because they're going to boom in the next 6 months, right? I mean,
Totally agree, including the great company, Virginia company, M&M Mars.
Well, there's a great expression on the street, though. Don't try to catch a falling knife. They'll do that when they think it's hit bottom.
All right, let me, Wick, I'm sorry we don't have time. I apologize because we're just up against it. Couple of headlines off of the market open. CNN: fear grips Wall Street as the Dow falls another 1,000 points. Sorry, I lost my there. At the opening after China retaliates against Trump's tariffs. For some reason, my iPhone's offering me up things I don't want. And Washington Post: Wall Street sell-off deepens as trade war escalates. Major U.S. indexes slump. Sean, what do you have tonight?
John Carney of Breitbart. Again, we're gonna have a great discussion on what this all means. I'm gonna ask all the questions about things. And then I mentioned this the other day, but we finally got it locked in. We had some initial issues. There's a guy named Shane Stevens. His grandfather has these tapes that he finally got a hold of and is allowing people to hear of this discussion about of LBJ, his grandfather included, talking about assassinating John F. Kennedy. It's mind blowing.
And I'm gonna do
That's at 6. And then I'm on tonight, last show of the weekend, barring breaking news special. But two-way tonight will be done at 4:30 Eastern time here on the two-way platform. So if you're going to join us on the two-way platform, please come on at 4:30 Eastern, regular link, 4:30 Eastern time. And then if you want to watch on X or on YouTube, it'll stream at 6 o'clock Eastern. So if you typically watch us on YouTube or X, just go normal time. You'll see a show that's just concluded. If you want to join us here to ask questions with all the roundup of the day's news, our guests include Alex Castellanos, the Republican strategist, one of our favorites, Amber Duke of the Daily Caller, and Matthew Bartlett. Matthew Bartlett is up in New Hampshire, where he's from, spending time with the two Democratic, one announced Pappas, Congressman Pappas, for the Senate seat, and then the other member of Congress, Maggie Goodlander, may run for the seat, which would create a Democratic primary for that open Senate seat that Jeanne Shaheen is leaving between the two incumbent House members. If that happens, first of all, you have a very competitive Democratic primary, which could be contentious as a late primary, and also would open up two New Hampshire House seats. So super key for those who care about New Hampshire politics, which many of us do. So join us again, and again, Amber Duke, the Daily Caller. Join us at 4:30 Eastern time here on Two Way, or watch us at 6 on YouTube. Thank you guys. Thank everybody who asked questions. Great week as far as we were concerned. A very tough week for a lot of folks in the country, and very glad to be part of a community that can discuss it with peace, love, and understanding. Have a good day. I'll see you at 6. Sean will see you. I'll see you at 4:30 rather. Sean will see you at 6, and all three of us will be back Monday morning, 9 a.m. Eastern time. Have a great day. Great weekend.